Hello, I am filming just an extra today, and I want to show you, and I'm sharing this reading for all of you who are viewing. Goes out for you. This is based on Literary Witches, a celebration of magical women writers. Taiza, probably Kitskaya. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Illustrated by Katie Oren. Forward by Pam Grossman. Beautiful, beautiful, good deck for not just women, but anybody that identifies with a more feminine side and realizes that part of themselves, no matter what. Very interesting little thing that you can do at home if you got a birthday or something like that coming up. It's one of those decks that I would say is a really good for self, and I really recommend that you, if you are fond of watching tarot and things like that, and even if you can't afford readings or aren't certain about wanting to do that, start with yourself. That's what I did. I think that's the best. If you can do it for yourself, it's empowering. But it's always good to have another's point of view. That's true. So I recommend that you work on your own self-healing, especially given the last 5 years. We've all got a lot to do. By using such means, you can find these for less online. Just Google for the best deal. Okay. So that's what I'm going to read on today, is a reading for you that are viewing this, that I'm going to use the Literary Witches Oracle 70 card deck and guidebook. I invested. I love literature, so of course I got that hard copy book. It's beautiful. And we have a diversity in this deck. There's isn't there Leslie Mormon Silko, I think, is one of the women included, indigenous. So there's a smorgasbord of ladies. All right? Okay. Well, let's begin and learn something about each card, and then I'll make a collective as my brain wraps around this reading. Try to incorporate the message, get it out to you. It's dealing with fate, and it's dealing with intensity, a lot of intense emotion, of the shadow self, of anger, rage, fury, and sorrow. So let's just take a look. We'll begin with Eileen Chang, and she symbolizes fate, outside forces, events falling into place, acceptance of these things. Now, Eileen Chang, she was born in 1920, she died in 1995, was born to an opium-addicted traditional Chinese father and a westernized mother who learned to ski on bound feet. Whew. When 17-year-old Chang contracted dysentery, her father dismissed her claims of ill health and locked her up in her bedroom for 6 months. She escaped with the help of her nurse. Witty and stylish, Chang was famous in Shanghai for her fiction about troubled romance and family betrayal. Though she died as a recluse, in Los Angeles, her work remains popular and beloved in China. So this is about enduring, for sure. And this is a very dark time. It has brought out a lot of darkness in people. And the one reason why a lot of this is being brought up in what America needs to heal within and of itself, it's racism, bigotry, its need to set things right within the indigenous population. Very glad that Biden just recently stopped and canceled the pipeline, which has meant it's caused a lot of indigenous folks that have been fighting for this for years just to really have hope and feel elated by this act. I'm telling you, people, it is a new era. It is not going to be business as usual as we've ever known it. And it's okay, because we're meant to change. So embrace change. Be willing to change what you need to and within yourself. And that means many times working on fears and shadow and anger and anxiety and all these troubling aspects. I feel like a lot of it has to do with the pandemic has made people's mental health much more agitated. But I know for a fact of my own and just everyone I know. And other people have agreed that they've had to up their medication or even take medication for the first time. 5 years is actually a hell of a long time to undergo a daily real anxiety. It's set off, I think, a lot, and is setting off a lot of anxiety, depressive episodes in people. And that needs to be looked at. We don't need to sweep it under the rug and pretend it's not there. This is, and now we are in an era to lance these wounds, not to let them hide and fester. So I feel with Eileen and Sylvia, there is the caution about enduring to only self-destruct. You need to make sure that you have, if need be, appointments set up. I personally do mine over Zoom to speak to my psychiatrist so that I have the medications that I need. I'm very grateful for them. They make me I don't feel anything other than balanced and able to deal with day to day. Doesn't mean that I don't have anxiety. It doesn't, definitely not, but it just makes managing my situation much better for me. This is what works for me. I recommend that people make use of that, and even such means of these as cards, journaling, self-work, where you're definitely not just depending on that one angle to healing, but bring in also getting out these feelings, because there's a lot of darkness that needs processing that has been endured for the last 5 years, and we are into going to be a very different era, a very era of change, and where I feel like we can choose to some degree how we also respond to this darkness. We can do it with a bit of humor to get through. I highly recommend that. but you want to be careful that you definitely work on your shadow with care. Now, Sylvia Plath's card is living in the dark, intensity, fury. A lot of us have felt fury just 24/7 for the last 5 years. Again, and the frustration of not being able to get someone who is blatantly breaking the law and harming our country out. It has been depressing at times, a sense of great deal of apathy at points, as well as just a sense of futility and frustration that he's not held to account. But we are now entering the era of holding people, and he sets off the prime example of being held to account for abuse of power. You're going to see a lot of people all over the map who have been corrupt. I feel like the universe is going to be pushing them into the I definitely see it into, and now you sow what you reap. Now you're going to reap. You've been given time to sow, now here you reap. Sylvia Plath was born in Boston, 1932. She died by suicide, 1963. She was a social and academic success in spite of severe depression. She had mental illness and suicide attempts. She was on a Fulbright college scholarship to Cambridge University when she met and married, and I don't think much of him, poet Ted Hughes. Much to my chagrin, that name is part of my family name. And it always bothers me every time. It's like, you don't know, Ted, you don't get that last name. While Hughes philandered, he was a jerk, and kept bees. Very self-absorbed man. Very toxic man. Plath stayed at home with 2 young children and wrote increasingly brilliant, scary poetry that made use of her anger at her husband and father, intense mental states, and obsession with death. At 30, Plath ended her life by putting her head in the oven. Okay. So I think this is definitely dealing with the trauma, especially, that we've endured as a nation and personally. Many of us have lost people, so many people. There's been a lot of deaths in our families, deaths that we can't mourn properly, haven't been able to, such as myself with my grandmother. I still haven't quite processed that. I feel that I will, but it's just not been the right time. So we have a lot of healing and processing of shadow and trauma, especially in this new era. But we don't have to put our head in the oven. We can instead choose, and need to choose, to be enduring, such as Eileen. Where I feel there is a positive influence with Sylvia, because I do love Sylvia, is that the recognition of why we need to exercise our rage that's been pent up and built up at this horrible systemic toxic system that isn't good for anybody, no matter how you identify. And there is a toxic male, messed up, that's called toxic, you know, unequal system that serves no one other than greed and the worst, like I said, the most toxic, ill-dignified aspects of masculinity. Is that's been going on for way too long, and the universe energy here is shifting. It's demanding that human beings need to evolve. I get this from my own dreams and readings and age. And I'm still young. So the work on your shadow self, definitely such things as journaling, especially where you have a situation where you can't personally confront someone. Sylvia seemed to channel her rage via writing and creative means. And I feel like there's a good message there to use a creative means. Unfortunately for her, that she was in at a time, an era that was not freeing. It was confinement, and I think a lot of the double standards is definitely, and that toxic relationship that she was in, which was reinforced by society and the era that she unfortunately lived in. We now have a new era. We have, though, to make sure that we do not succumb to trauma, and that we endure, however imperfectly, like Eileen, and that we channel our inner pent-up, bottled-up rage, anger, etc. That it doesn't matter how old or young you are, that has affected you. This, especially these last 5 years. But more than that, just think on in general, healing of your being. That is what needs to happen on this planet. Each person, just work on yourself and work on being, working on your shadow, your pain. Because out of your pain and your wound is usually where people lash out and where they get stuck. And if they weren't born already prone to narcissism, you can definitely have an environment where you might end up gravitating more that way. So we need more empathetic people. Boy, have we discovered that there's a lot of narcissists recently. We get Agatha Christie. And so this is card says trickery. I know I said I was only going to do 2, but I'm going with what I feel. And moon. Okay. Because there's a lot. This to me is speaking about the politics, what's been going on, all this underhanded, sleight of hand, gaslighting that we've experienced. There's a lot of pent-up rage and anger within people, and we need to, in a healthy way, process that. And by a creative and not a destructive means. Satire. Write it out. Who knows? Write a screenplay or a poetry or whatever. Where, think of, was it Jonathan Swift? You can be, turn to satire, turn to creative means like Eileen, and endure. And work on healing your shadow side, and empower yourself that way as best you can. That you'll do better for it. And doesn't mean you stop taking medication or anything like that. No, stick with what works for you, and if you need something a little extra, consider employing such tools that as these. Where you have like an oracle card that is nurturing and helping you to work on things. especially the last 5 years, like I've said, tremendous amount of trauma upon people, and has played with their subconscious and just shaken them. So this darkness, this uncertainty, this rage, we don't need to have it bottled up anymore, but we want to make sure that we process it safely. And creatively is the way to do so, not destructively. As this is a feminine deck, also the Moon and the Elder card of Christie speak of your cleverness and following your intuition, valuing your wisdom. And I feel like becoming more whole with that Moon, coming into your power, not staying in a state where you constantly feel a victim, victimized, or held, like the last 5 years it felt held against your will. This is working through your shadow, frees you up to become a stronger, resilient, more empowered person. It puts you in touch with your wisdom and your cleverness in dealing you so much wiser for this experience. And you know when someone's gaslighting you, and there is finding creative ways to vent that bottled up energy and process it. Okay? Just a pause, going to read the Agatha Christie and Moon card for you. Okay. Well, with Agatha Christie, and the Moon, which is listed as something, an energy that you work with. I think that's what's listed here in this book. It is listed as materials that you can work with, which is materials, they say. Now, Agatha Christie represents trickery, suspicion, deception, the missing piece. The missing piece. Agatha Christie, born 1890 and passed in 1976, wrote nearly 70 detective novels, making her the most popular novelist in all of history. Taking place in a British aristocratic world filled with luxury, trains, handsome estates, and butlers, her books kept the reader guessing about the truth behind their murders until the shocking twists are revealed. Okay? And the Moon is surrender, mystery, looming change. I feel that it's again reminding us that there is significant change coming in. A lot of what we have dealt with, a very suppressive, subvertive government, is going to be exposed for their acts that we have endured, that has led to a collective trauma. And that to know that they will be exposed. Work on yourself. You will be able to move from a place of just having to be bottled up and frustrated every day to more actively working on emotions that may come out. That can be being very irritable, snapping, and moody, I think that's normal, considering that we're shifting and we're going to be needing to vent. We just need to make sure we don't dump it on people, that we're mindful of boundaries, and that if we're feeling like that, maybe a little, well, this is where the pandemic isolation might be a good thing, that you process that toxic emotion and do a lot of cleansing and clearing with that. All right? So there is your reading with the Literary Witches Oracle. So let me know what you think in the comments below. This is for your Monday through Friday, and just your general oracle read as a bit of free counsel through the cards to you. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Feel free to share, and I appreciate that. Thank you.